welcome to the Legal & General Just Covered podcast, where we talk to advisors, intermediaries and key stakeholders in the financial intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Georgia, and today we are joined by Emma Vaughan, MD at Omni Protect. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I've been so looking forward to this, Emma. You're coming on. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
I think there's very three enthusiastic people around the table today, so looking forward as well.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and kind of what Omni Protect is about.
Okay, ever-emerging role. So I'm Emma, obviously MD of Omni Protect, which is the protection part of one of the largest intermediary groups in the UK. So I'm part of Fintel, which covers off basically everything from financial technology, regulatory support, mortgages protection, investments, legals, you name it, it all kind of sits in Fintel. What we've tried to do is create a safe space for intermediaries, and then you can basically pick off any service that you need. I have run the protection division for the past 5 years, coming up to 5 years. It's expanded dramatically in the last 18 months with some of the acquisitions. So if I was speaking to an advisor on the street, I would say I basically look after SimplyBiz and 360 for all of their protection needs.
Oh, fantastic. And you said that it's changed a lot in the last 18 months with those acquisitions. What's the kind of the biggest change that you've been dealing with? And is it good, bad? Somewhere in the middle?
I think the biggest challenge has probably been the embedding, which I'll come on to. But yeah, lots of acquisitions, probably more on the invest side, so not really in our space. But there's a couple of different areas that have touched on what I do day to day. So name the biggest one is obviously purchasing 360, which was a direct competitor to SimplyBiz, hence where the name Omni comes from. I'm now an agnostic brand that sits above all the intermediary brands. So that's been one of the biggest changes. So instead of just looking after SimplyBiz now, which is predominantly mortgage and protection advisors, I now look after 360, which is predominantly investment advisors. So some of the conversations that we're having are wildly different to what I've had the last couple of years. Really interesting though, because it's kind of pivoted, especially with how the market is at the moment, and looking at some of the regulatory changes and the products and propositions we're talking about. But interesting in terms of the types of advisors as well. It isn't kind of just 1, 2, 3, 4-man bands. We're now talking to these massive multi-office brands throughout the UK, getting them to write protection, which is a challenge in itself sometimes, but a really fun one is that I'm finding something different, something pivot.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as we know, only fairly recently, the FCA has said about the protection gap, which is absolutely amazing for our industry. And I suppose with the likes of Omni and that new proposition, if you like, going out there and showing other advisors how to write more protection, but doing it in a holistic way, you're perfectly poised to show them, aren't you? Because of the breadth of experience that you've got within the Omni setup.
Oh, absolutely. And it's across the team as well. So obviously it doesn't just sit with me. I have to obviously give credit where it's credit's due. So I have my equal on the invest side. So Omni Invest, we've got Fabian Wiesner. So across all propositions, we're completely covered. News just in, we are launching Omni Mortgages as well in March. So obviously we've got Martin Reynolds, who's the Chief Exec of Mortgages across the group. He'll be taking that out as well. So in terms of the conversations that are having, it's actually allowing us to go out to the market as well. So we aren't just kind of stuck within the kind of four walls of the Fintel group. We've actually been going whole of market to speak to firms about different types of tech, different types of regulatory support and how they can use us for different services. It doesn't have to be everything. I think some of the really interesting conversations we've been having is with some of maybe the bigger networks in the market as well, looking at how we can support those. And I think that's kind of where the industry's going now. We've seen a lot over the last, well, I would say couple of years. It's probably gone light speed in the last 12 months with mergers and acquisitions and consolidators across the market. We're seeing that the spike in that even just in the last 6 months has been massive. But the collab, what it's doing is bringing the industry together. I think there's a lot more collaboration now because we can lean on networks. Networks can lean on the DA space as well. So those conversations are starting to happen quicker compared to previous years.
Yeah, those collaboration opportunities are massive, aren't they?
Have you tried the new and improved Ignite? 4 tools, 1 platform, 0 stress. Ignite combines the power of 4 tools. Criteria, affordability, product and property in one easy-to-use platform, giving you everything you need to research and compare for the best mortgage options. Ignite's data is updated directly by lenders in real time, so you can stay ahead with confidence in a fast-moving market. To see the power of 4 in action, click the link below to book a demo.
And as you know, Omni, Simply Biz, Fintel, we've had a close strategic partnership for a long time. What I've found particularly lovely is seeing when you've come in as well, and the changes you've made, perhaps on the quality side, which we'll touch on in a minute. But I'm interested to take it back, Emma. So how did you get into the industry? Do you fall into it like a lot of us? How did that happen?
I did actually, yeah. So went to college. Actually, I stayed on for sixth form for first year. Wasn't really interested. Thought, right, I'm gonna spread my wings, go to college. I hated that even more. So I actually took a 4-month break to decide what I wanted to do. And after about 4 months, my mum was like, no, you actually need to go and get a job now. There's something out there for you. You just need to go and find it. So I started working at Legal & General, my first ever proper job, I'll say, because I did do a tiny stint at HSBC, but wasn't keen on bank assurance. So yeah, first proper job was actually at L&G in the team that Wayne and George are working now.
Some of which you know very well, they're still
exactly.
there. Yeah.
So started off as a telephone account manager, campaign manager, then BDM, then out on the road up to Newcastle to secure my first role as a face-to-face BDM. I was out for about 3 years doing that, working with lots of different networks, big firms, small firms and everything in between. And then from there, I needed to come back to Cardiff because I was only covering maternity leave. And as much as I loved Legal & General, being in the office wasn't for me any longer. So jumped ship and headed over to British Friendly, obviously smaller friendly society, where I was one of a team of 50. So very small business. So got my hands dirty in lots of different areas, not only in the distribution
But
side.
that taught you a massive amount, didn't it, being in a smaller company like that?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Absolutely. And I think probably that was where my career pivoted slightly at British Friendly, because that was during lockdown. So rather than just, again, focusing on distribution, I helped out on the claim side, the new business side. And I think I'd never really dealt with customers on a one-to-one basis. It was always B2B. It was always distribution. Yeah. So actually dealing with customers at a real difficult time as well gave me insight into what we probably need to do a little bit more of as an industry. Don't get me wrong, very condensed during COVID about what was happening, and certainly the claims situation, but gave me a better understanding of what we could do as a wider industry and how I could kind of push that forward. So when the role came up at Simply Biz to actually be a strategic account manager to begin with, and this is probably one of my blowing my own trumpet moments. I applied for the role of strategic account manager, but after the interview, they decided that they didn't want me as a strategic account manager. They wanted me as head of protection.
I love that. That's not a blowing the trumpet. That's celebrating success, and that's fantastic.
It's a big one to get through, though. It took them 4 months to get that signed off by the board.
Yeah.
And everything that comes, obviously, with a head of protection, because they previously didn't have a head of protection.
Right, so new role.
It was actually a brand new role they wanted to create, because they thought, right, this has legs, it can go somewhere. Bit of internal conflict, because protection used to sit within the mortgage world, sat with Martin Reynolds. Yeah. We had pensions investments on one side, mortgages protection on the other. The Director of Distribution decided that it was going to be 4 pillars in its own right, so mortgages protection, pensions investment. So they needed then a head of, which is where they brought me in. That was September 2021. And from there, I'll be honest, my feet haven't touched the ground in terms of how we've changed the proposition, how we've supported members, the acquisitions, creating and launching the Premium Club, doing exactly the same with Omni through 360, and now into 2026 plans.
It's fantastic to see. And do you know what the difference is? And I can see why they created that role for you, because the passion shines through and it makes such a difference in the industry. So I suppose what's interesting to see is just Simply Biz really took that strategic decision to be like, no, protection is very, very important. Yeah. How are you finding the protection conversation differing since acquiring 360? So from that kind of a wealth advisor proposition to a mortgage, a broker, maybe a protection specialist, do they approach the conversation in a different way?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's kind of two, I say yes. Maybe some of the language is different that they use, but it's still very much the same in the other universe that I have in Simply Biz. So, if we took a mortgage advisor, you'll get some who are fantastic at writing protection. Their penetration on it is, second to none. And it's part of their day-to-day conversations. They come hand in hand. We've had plenty of conversations, Wayne and I, about how there are mortgage advisors who don't do that. And then there's a gap there. And it's very much the same in the investment space. You either have advisors who have probably come through a journey of maybe bank assurance where the conversation they build together, or they do completely avoid it. And not from, the want to have that conversation with the customer, but sometimes I do feel it's probably more of an education piece, and as well the demographic of advisor. We're always talking about the average age of an advisor, where they sit in terms of their client demographics as well. Very different in the 360 base. Most advisors are in their 50s and 60s. They, even some of the numbers that they throw around about, they don't work with customers who have anything less than 2 million in assets under management, which isn't a conversation we have day to day in protection. So yeah, a very different breed of advisor. I think what's interesting though is the opportunity that it shows, because ultimately, yes, they haven't been having those conversations, but they can have those conversations now, and they certainly can have that with the support of Omni. But they aren't even looking at all the other angles they could be coming at. So a lot of the conversation is based around kind of wealth propositions, and whole of life is a big thing, and joint life second death, and gifting to Vivos is fantastic. But they haven't thought of any of the other types of products and propositions, whereas my one is always income protection. It's always been my go-to. But if you are looking at clients who are building their wealth, the last thing they need is to be off work and not be able to pay into their pension fund because they haven't got any sick pay coming in. So even kind of opening their eyes to those types of conversations has been great. But even a complete 180, if they didn't want to write it themselves, the referral conversation, a lot of the 360 clients have really latched on to that and thought, right, well, I'm never going to be an expert in it, but there are in-house experts that can do it for us. So yes, definitely, we've seen a massive increase in the amount of protection written as well. So just a highlight on the numbers. Simply Biz wrote 63 million in APE in 2024, and I gave the team a target last year of 65 million, and we smashed that at 67. Obviously, we've only started recording the 360 numbers, but they did complete on 15 million in 2024 and 18 million last year. So we're now currently sat at around 87 million in the market. And I think I'll go as far as to say we are the biggest by about 2 million.
That's amazing.
A lot of that is conversations, small policies right up to the whole of life gift.
And it's a lot of hard work to change that kind of that mindset of advisors, those that maybe previously hadn't. And also it is a skill set to make a good referral as well. That is something that we work with a lot of advisors on to help them line up and tee up that conversation, so that it's not, a client's getting a phone call from somebody that they don't know and they have no idea what they're about to talk about as well.
I think it's the trust element of it. And I think, some of the stuff that we talk about a lot, and what, even Wayne and I have covered off in previous kind of get-togethers, what builds a great team, and whether that's Legal and General and Omni, whether that's Omni and the firms that we work with, is the trust element. And that throughout my entire career is kind of where, right from telephone account manager to where I am now, whether you're delivering a good, bad or indifferent message, advisors and colleagues, peers need to be able to trust you. And I guess that's where we're actually getting to in the market now, is having, touching back on what we did is with the referral pieces, is we've put our trust in those firms, therefore other firms put their trust in them. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. Even if we went back 20, 30 years and looked at traditional sales processes, one of the biggest key areas is the trust in there. So you need to know somebody to understand them, to trust them, and then buy from them. But ultimately, that's all what we're doing, is just leaning on each other for support.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The trust element's massive. We've seen that personally, haven't we, over the last few years, if you like. So absolutely brilliant. And since you've come in as well, Emma, there's one particular thing I think that you've brought in that has resonated both with us, because obviously we're big on it, and others in the industry as well, providers I'm talking about. But it's been quality. It's been distribution quality management, or DQM as we affectionately call it. So tell us about how you brought that in, and what your thoughts were around that, obviously coming from two providers as well.
So I was there when the pioneer kicked it all off, Mr. Mike Pritchard at Legal and General. So we must be going back, I'm not going to give my age away, about 20 years now, when I was there. And for me, part of having a good sales process, a good advice process is not just what you put in the top of the hopper, but absolutely what comes out the back end as well. Because if we are focusing on customer outcomes, to use some of the buzzwords that we have to use now from a regulatory perspective, it absolutely, to deliver a good customer outcome, it isn't just about talking to a customer, getting the policy in force and then leaving them get on with it. It's actually about what is that constant stream of communication. How do you make sure they've got what they need from you in terms of products and proposition from the day they start speaking to you right until, you know, they are moving into a different part of their life and looking at pensions and investments later on down the line. So from a sales quality perspective, it's always been part of something that I've done within each business. It was quite interesting to move to a friendly society where the importance wasn't as high as L&G, but obviously the difference in the size of the businesses and the number of firms they were working with. But as the years went on and the business grew, it absolutely became, you know, a key area of importance. So coming into Simply Biz as it was in 2021, it was actually really interesting, without giving any secrets away, that they just weren't monitoring it at all. And it wasn't just us. The DA space, the directly authorised space, were not looking into sales quality and retention, or as you said, as we lovingly call it, DQM. So for me, it actually was a bit of an easy change. So I love it when people say, you know, the difference that I've made there in terms of the sales quality numbers. However, it's probably just bringing in a little bit of common sense as well. Because the reality of it is, if you've got customers coming in and falling straight off the back of the books, even from a commercial perspective, which, as you can understand, the powers that be are mainly focused on that, it's understanding, right, how do we plug this? And the easiest way is to make sure you work with your firms to make sure they're doing what they need to do for their customers. And actually then it's a benefit of working with your customers. It's not actually that is the main focus. It's how do we improve this? And this is kind of, you know, a residual benefit to work with them.
Bearing that in mind then, because I think this is really key on, and you bring a different perspective from the two different providers and obviously working at Omni Protect. What would be some top tips that you would give an advisor? What do you look out for of where you can make immediate impact in building up their quality? What does good look like in that area?
The first one for me, and it's the biggest one I've seen across the pieces, is that constant communication with customers. Yeah. So, you know, we can look at the sales process and we can add more products and propositions in. We can make sure they've got their IP, you know, their level term assurance, their critical illness and what they need. That's a sales angle, that is. That's how do we improve sales. But actually, if you wanted to look at it from a sales quality perspective, to keep that customer in the position they're in, or even to improve it, you need to be in constant communication. And it doesn't need to be phone calls every other month just to check in, but there does need to be some element of, you know, are you keeping in touch to make sure, you know, they know about all their additional benefits? Are you keeping in touch on birthdays and Christmas? Just so if any circumstances do change, you're at the forefront of their mind to come to tell you about that. So it doesn't have to be a sales pitch. You don't need to be going in and saying, oh, you haven't got income protection, or did you know you could have this? It's literally just that if anything in that customer's life changes, you know immediately.
Yeah, it's that kind of post-sale, but also the review process. So that must be something you focus on quite a bit then. You see the difference within that.
That's what we have. We've got a business development quality manager, Kelly Phillips, and that's probably one of her main areas of focus with firms. We do have quite a few large telephone-based firms, which, as you can imagine, churn out policies day to day. But then the majority of our firms are 1 to 5 man RIs. So it's actually looking at their process and saying, yeah, you're great on this side, but we're struggling over here, whether it's with CFO, lapse year 1, or, you know, all the other metrics that we monitor and measure across the industry. There's always some tweak in there that it could literally be adding a sentence into a sales conversation that will affect then your CFOs. If they understand exactly what it is they've bought, they're not going to cancel within the first 12 months. So yeah, it's focusing on what exactly individual firms have issues with and how do we change that really quickly.
Yeah, it's just ensuring that the support that you're providing is dovetailed in line with what they do.
Yeah.
And that's for the benefit of, I mean, obviously having Kelly on board now as well, you know, having someone who's focusing on quality as well as business development is absolutely fantastic. You know, her background and stuff, taking that into account, you know, she knows what needs to be done.
And I think it's even just, you know, we all love a stat and bringing the numbers down, but actually it's what sits behind it. It's the quality of the work that goes in to bring that number down. Because, you know, we can all bring sales quality down. We can turf a few advisors out of the club and we can, you know, manipulate the numbers, but actually to see year on year, not only is the annual premium new business improving, but the quality is coming down as well, when normally you see them both go up together because more business coming in, sales quality sometimes takes a hit, but we just haven't seen that. We've seen it go complete.
That's always been the
cross-section.
conundrum, isn't it? It was particularly when you were looking at whether you're in sales, whatever you were doing, at whatever industry, it's get the business in and then look at the quality. But it's nice to see that both are
do it
going in the
together.
right direction
Yeah.
with regards to that. That's fantastic stuff.
So in terms then, what would your kind of number one tip be for an advisor firm looking to come and join Omni Protect? What do you look out for?
That's an interesting one. What do we look out for? So for us, because of the width and breadth of the services that we offer, for us, it could be anything. You know, if you are an investment advisor, if you're a mortgage advisor, protection only, you know, complete holistic advisor. For us, it's about the support that we offer, but it's a tailored support. So if you only needed help with protection, we have, you know, a fully focused team that can help you build conversations, even a protection only advisor. If you're focusing on life, critical illness and IP, as so many do, because there's enough customers out there to cover in the marketplace with the protection gap. I had to get that in. You know, we've been talking about the protection gap.
Got to
for
get
long
that
enough.
one in.
I had to get that in.
Definitely. Take that all
The
day
gap
long.
we didn't know about, but now we do.
Yeah. So even for those customers, those advisors, it's actually pivoting and having a look at a different angle. So, you know, business protection as an example, they'll have data, reams of data on customers who could be sole traders, directors of their own businesses. So it's actually, right, how do we broaden your income stream to look at different areas? So investment advisors, not used to having a protection conversation. Do we help you set up a protection desk, or do we help you with a referral angle? So there's literally something for everybody within the wider Fintel group, and certainly with Omni Protect.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. And we've already talked about personally for you coming into the industry and the journey that you've had. Was there anything in particular in that journey that you've had, Emma, which is a particular pivotal moment in your career where you thought, right, okay, this is how I'm going to push forward, or something that you went through that you thought, yeah, that sort of helped me form who I am today?
I think one of the biggest ones was, and what gives me the passion, as Georgia mentioned, is when I first started at Legal & General, I'd been there 4 months. I'll be honest, I was a typical 19-year-old. I worked in new business. I went to work, I did what I needed to do. But I had a phone call off my mum on, I think it was a Thursday afternoon, and it started with, don't panic. Which is never a great phone call.
No.
And rarely do I panic anyway. I'm not a panicker.
No, you're not. Definitely not.
Not a pure. Yeah. So, and she said, don't panic. And basically my mum had a stroke in London whilst driving. So my mum was head of training and compliance at Barclays Mortgages, and she was working away. I was 19, looking after my 16-year-old brother for a couple of days while she was working away. And she'd called to say she'd had a stroke in the car. She was fine. She was in hospital in Ascot. Luckily, she did have private medical, so she was being looked after very well as on top of that, so we didn't need to worry about it. But basically, she was off for 12 months recovering. I was helping. I was looking after him. I was helping look after my brother. And I think that was probably one of the things for me that I saw the benefit of having the mortgage paid off. My mother got to recover. My biggest thing, my lifestyle wasn't impacted whatsoever.
Yeah.
My brother went through his GCSEs fine.
But your mum wouldn't want your lifestyle to be impacted either, would she? She
No.
would want you to be able to not change anything and still have you doing your GCSE,
and
things
that's
like that.
always been since even right through to now, exactly the same as she is. But she got better. She was fine. She went back to work. So that was probably the biggest, because I think that's where it cemented. I actually believe in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always, right, well, you know, I'm a combination. I've got a father who's a politician and a mum who works in compliance. So I'm a kind of middle ground with where I work in sales, especially in a regulatory capacity. So that's probably one of the biggest moments in my career, a very young one that kind of cemented where I was going with it. And I think there was probably a combination of lots of small things as I've gone through my career that has kept me in distribution. So while, you know, I absolutely love learning and I'm always interested in what's going on in different areas, you know, at the moment I'm learning all about M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and how we're doing that across the group. So that for me is a personal thing that I'd like to move into. But for me, I'm a salesperson through and through. So what I actually love is, and what's been really interesting, because I've been doing it a lot with 360, is actually getting out in front of firms and sitting and having conversations. And sometimes they're not always great conversations, but I'm not fearful of difficult conversations. In fact, those are the ones I really
feel like
love.
you relish them too.
If you can go into a firm and you can sit and you can change their mind about something, regardless of what it is, and it can be commercials, underwriting, claims, you name it. If you can come out of there and you've changed something and they've gone on to do really well, for me, it's small wins like that have probably been the biggest thing for me throughout my career.
Absolutely amazing. I love that. Just to hear those. I think it's just the personal stories also resonate, don't they? We talk about them a
always
lot.
talk about
Everyone's got a personal story. It's lovely to hear it, and it just gives you the reason for your being, doesn't it? The passion that you've got.
Absolutely. And they're not always great stories either. So a kind of more recent one for me is my best friend from college, her little boy was diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer when he was 16. And he went into remission, and then it came back quite aggressively. And they didn't have enough money to send him to, I think it was Germany, for trials.
Right.
Which was really interesting considering the industry I work in, and they didn't have any children's critical illness set up. And because they didn't have enough money to send him, and they didn't raise enough in time through Just Giving pages, Jacob passed away last May. So for me, another pivot moment is to say, great story with my mum, but there's still awful things happening with children, mainly. And when you hear that, we aren't doing enough as an industry, because that shouldn't happen in the slightest. And, we all know advisors who sell purely based on what we're doing for children's cover in the market, and they actually get the most traction. So there's something we could learn from that as an industry. They are the key points that customers mainly are looking for. It's actually not a selfish policy. It's how do we cover everybody else? So I think that was last May. So that's probably spurred me on a bit more in terms of the training and development and how we support advisors to have those conversations. Because it's not always easy to talk about, but we all have a story like that. And it's awful to feel like you're exploiting a really sad story. But if more people
brings it
talked,
to life, though,
if
doesn't
more
it?
people talked about it, then...
And you mentioned before about metrics and stats, and we all do love a stat, but there's a story behind every stat. That's what I always think. It's the best way of bringing it to life is with that. And when we think about that story and how we land it, we've never come across an advisor that approaches the protection conversation without changing it after having a claim and having that realization and something happening. So to have that kind of close person, it makes such a difference in terms of the belief and the drive.
It resonates, doesn't it? When we're talking to advisors, we talk about, if you've got stories, share them. If you haven't got a story, borrow one from someone. Some people come into the industry, they don't, but most people know someone who's had a critical illness or had something like that, don't they? Really, really important to share. So in terms of Omni and where you're going, the trajectory, the pathway, where do you think things are going to head with regards to advice and that? Obviously we've mentioned the protection gap with regards to the regulator, which is really, I suppose, fantastic in a way. It's been acknowledged because it shows what we do is right, we know it's the right thing to do. We've always known that, I suppose. Yeah. Where do you see sort of Omni and the wider advice space for protection going?
So the next thing for me is, two things really. First, I've been expanding my team. Well, it's more than tripled in the last, I would say, year, and we've still got more to come. So for me, it's about how do we make sure we were out there, boots on the ground, working with advisors day in, day out, and expanding those conversations. But the second part of that for me is AI. Again, we've managed to get this far in and nobody's touched on AI yet. I'm big on it driving efficiencies. So I know we've heard all these stories about how, jobs will be gone. But actually, I think the role of AI in financial advice is a great addition to drive an efficiency and actually make you as an advisor better. With the time that it can save you, and that's where we are. So as a wider group, we're trialing quite a bit of AI at the moment that can help with all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. So things like file checking and compliance. So if you've got a system that can do that, it means then you can focus on other things and working with more customers. I rely on Copilot. Other systems are available massively, and I couldn't function at the level that I do without AI in terms of data analysis, email responses and things, just the basic stuff like that. So for us, it is very much looking at what we can do to help us spend more time doing what we're good at.
L&G Apply is our new annuity application platform, designed to save you time on every application. Sign digitally and avoid rekeying client details and track progress in real time. Tap the link in the episode description and our team will reach out to help you get started.
So I suppose, do you see that's where the industry is shifting towards, or is there anything else that you would also bring in as part of that?
I've always got two trains of thought on this. I'm all about making everybody's life easier, and I think that can be done with technology. We don't even have to say AI, because there's tech out there that is, can make your life easier now that isn't being utilised. So I think that's one angle. I think we probably need to be mindful, though, that we don't lose that human touch. I think one of the things you're great at L&G is still having account management teams and people out there. If advisors need support, they like to see the whites of your eyes, then you have that. And that's one area that we shouldn't be stepping away from as an industry, because even, we've got 3,500 firms, and generally some of the feedback that we get is that they don't see enough account managers. Now, I'm not talking about the ones who live in the Outer Hebrides, or Aberdeen. That's what I get a lot of if we never see anybody.
I'm off to Aberdeen soon anyway.
There we go.
You are.
I'll tell them you're on your way. But yeah, there still needs to be that element, because, going back right to the beginning, advisors, age demographics, where we still are right now. So there's no point running ahead and saying we need younger advisors. It's going down the AI route. We actually still need to cater for the advisors that are here right now. And that means they like to see people. They like to be able to speak to somebody. They like to pick up the phone, even if it's just an email. That's where we still need to focus on, while we're still trying to cultivate, obviously, getting younger advisors in and supporting them.
And I think we've listened to that, haven't we, as well at L&G? So we've gone more regional based, which certainly helps with that. We were talking about it before, weren't we?
We were, yeah. They've gone out and they've gone more regional, so therefore, they might be going to a particular place, and there might be a few firms there where the BDM can then drop in and see them. So, we're doing things more in person. I think as well, with the advent of AI, people are valuing some of that face-to-face and also, that real-time sort of interaction, rather, because the buzzword is AI, isn't it? How much can we do with regards to that? But we don't want to get too carried away with it, do you?
No, we don't want to lose that kind of human touch, which is very tricky. And you want to know that you're talking to a human as well. You don't want to be kind of missing out on that in any way, because the empathy part, the bringing that out, building the trust, these are all skills that we really try and help advisors kind of build out, because they will help with those conversations and the very difficult conversations as well.
And perfectly positioned for that, Jordan, if I'm honest, because obviously the market development team is a perfect example for us, that we find that actually how do you help advisors have those conversations. So I've been asked to be part of a panel this week where there's a report, more stats. We've got stats coming out of our ears at the moment across the industry with all the different reports. However, it's how do we put that into practice? Because it's all well and good saying 70% of the UK aren't financially resilient. Yeah, that's a great number. But how does an advisor approach that with a customer? Because if you said to a customer, do you think you're financially resilient? Yeah, I'm all right. That 70% means nothing. It's breaking it down. What questions do you need to ask? And even if it's taking one or two questions away that you stick in your sales process, that opens the conversation, that takes you from a decreasing term assurance through to a life kick and an IP. Again, you've done the best by that customer just by asking one or two more questions. And that's actually where advisors need more help.
And I think the human element, we look at behavioural biases quite a lot, actually, because as a human, we can't function thinking that something's going to happen to us at any point. So those people that you're asking and they're saying, yeah, I'm all right, we're financially resilient, it's because we can't admit to ourselves, and we don't want to say that maybe I could do more. So being able to push that conversation and really open up their minds and take them on the journey through it is really, really key.
They don't want to kick the tyres, and they don't want to look at it because they realise, those tyres might deflate. And actually, no, I'm not resilient.
No. We're the exception to the rule. That's kind of what you start thinking about, isn't it? So I suppose kind of moving forwards then, AI is obviously massive. What else are you seeing within the industry that at Omni Protect you're really kind of embracing or looking forward to, I would suggest?
I think with everything's been going with the economic climate at the moment and the regulator looking at protection, everybody's been a bit weary. Well, not everybody, but there has been a weariness in the market of should we do this, should we do this, and kind of a bit push and pull. I think that's probably settled down quite a bit now. We're getting a lot of inquiries at the moment about kind of post-budget opportunities.
Yep.
And that seems to be full speed ahead for all advisors. So the ones who are sitting in the wealth space are coming to us and asking, how do I talk about it? Who should I speak to? Which providers can support me with this? But even the mortgage and protection firms are asking, right, what do I need to think about if a customer asks me about this? So actually it is a massive opportunity, not just for wealth advisors, but mortgage and protection advisors, because they're going to get questioned by customers.
Bearing in mind we're now into 26, are you finding a step change in the number of advisors that have almost woken up to that, if you like?
It's because they're being asked by customers, though. It's not that this has come from, they've seen something that's happening or there's some changes coming with budgets and things. It has literally been customers going, well, I've got this massive IHT bill now. How can you help me with this? And they're like, I'm going to need to put some protection.
Customers have been educated, haven't they? Because they've seen the media. They've gone and done a few Google searches or whatever, haven't they? And then they found out, okay, I need to find out a little bit more information here. Go talk to an advisor. And that could be any advisor, couldn't it? They might not be thinking, they're mortgage and protection. No. They might be someone they've built up a brilliant relationship with and they've gone to ask them.
Well, look at the boom that we had with PMI a couple of years ago. As soon as the NHS waiting lists go through the roof, everybody needs a PMI policy. And this is exactly the same, especially customers who've built years building wealth. The last thing they want then is to have to lose some of it if something were to happen to them. So it's definitely sparking off lots of conversations, but also different conversations in different brackets now. It isn't just the uber wealthy we're talking about IHT conversations. It's trickling down. It's moving down a level. So, even the likes of us who'll work probably until we're in our 60s, it is affecting everybody. So you have to look at house price accumulation and stuff.
Haven't you just brought people into that bracket, hasn't it?
Well, I keep seeing all the acronyms. I don't know if you've seen the Henry one. So high earners, not yet rich.
Ooh,
not rich yet.
I like that. Hoover?
Yeah. The Henry the Hoover. Yeah, that'll be you hoovering up that business.
Hoovering, that's exactly.
There you
that's
go.
What we'll be doing.
That's an article right there for it.
I love that. That's a good line.
Yeah. But it's opening it up, isn't it? And I think that's one of the key things. And really, what I was asking before about the kind of 360, the wealth advisors, is when they think of protection, they're probably thinking that whole of life, gift into viva, joint life, second death. But you still need to protect that person's income before they get there. And certainly, with what do we do when we earn more money? We spend it. So there's more responsibility on it almost. And it doesn't really matter how many zeros you've got on the end of things. You do still need protection. So we really try and help kind of bridge that gap in the knowledge piece.
I think everyone has a common need, don't they? The saying goes, everyone's common need is everyone needs an income to actually live, don't they? And
it's all relative though, isn't it?
It's all right,
It doesn't matter how much you earn. The reality of it is, if that disappears, then you're going to need to plug that gap somewhere. Exactly. And when you talk about some of the dependents you may have, whether that's children, parents, everyone laughs at me and my dependents are obviously 4 dogs.
They cost a lot of money.
The 4 of them have different sets of food. They cost a lot. So absolutely, everybody has some type of dependent, even if you are a dependent and you live alone. But it affects absolutely everyone. And kind of even as I've gone through Legal in General and then into a friendly society, IP being the basis of all financial conversations is, I genuinely believe that, because if you are of working age and you are paying for anything, even a mobile phone, then you are going to need to replace that income at some point if you're off. So there shouldn't be a conversation that happens in the market where IP isn't included.
It shows the importance of the advisor and the importance of Omni in their support of advisors.
Wait, I love you enthusiasm.
You know me, I love it.
I love that.
That is absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is fantastic. And what we've actually introduced as part of our Just Covered podcast is we want to share that kind of knowledge and we want to kind of build that community up. Yeah. So we have actually got a question from our past episode guest that we would love to pose to you actually and kind of have your reply to it. So our last guest asked, what advice would you give yourself when you first started out as a young woman in our industry?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably 2 things. The first one is you have to focus. If you want to do anything, you have to focus. And by focus, I don't mean you have to work really hard and, knuckle down and not live your life. But you need to understand kind of what you want to do. And the biggest thing I have found in terms of focus for me is not listening to anybody around me in terms of what I wanted to do. So coming into the industry, as you can imagine, parents who are strong advocates of me going into financial services, supporting me along the way. I think some of the difficulties or challenges I found along the way was actually the industry we worked in and some of the people who were in our industry. And being a young person in the industry, sometimes hearing things, you know, the way the industry used to be, it was kind of, well, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should focus on something else. And I think if it's something that you want, then you focus on it and you go for it and you don't listen to any noise outside of that. You just head down and get on with it.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice, that is. Yeah.
And then the second part for me, coming in as a young female, I think it's probably a promotion of the industry more than anything. I've had some extremely strong advocates in my time in the industry. I'm actually probably one of the fortunate people that I haven't suffered from this imbalance where you have men who are in these high positions and then females coming through find it more difficult. I have to hold my hands up there and say I haven't struggled with that. From starting in legal and general, I had a fantastic advocate in Ian Clark, who was our sales director at the time. Ian's been a massive advocate of me throughout my entire career, and I've had the same as I've moved into Simply Biz. Roger Bailey has been a fantastic advocate for me there. Not everybody's lucky to have advocates, but actually that's probably a promotion or something we could do bigger as an industry in terms of mentoring people, because I think there are opportunities out there, and I think a lot gets missed because people aren't being looked after, they aren't being mentored. So my advice would probably be is, there is somebody that you think is out there that you really aspire to be like, or you like how they work. You know, I've got Paula Goodall from Zurich, I'm sure you all know. Yeah. When I first started at Legal in General, and this is a story I shouldn't tell, especially not on a podcast, that is going to go out everywhere. But when I first started at Legal in General, Ian Clark had given me the job. I went to my first distribution meeting, probably about 60 people in a room. I will say I was 19 at the time, so I was young. And I sat in the room with a dreadful hangover at the back of the room. And Paula, who was Paula Jones at the time, was at the front, national account manager. She was kicking butt up on stage, doing the stats, getting the sales team geared up. And I fell asleep. And Paula shouted from the front of the room, "Emma, am I keeping you awake back there?" And from that day, I've never fallen asleep in a meeting since then. But I just
Make sure we don't do that.
Yeah, we won't do that.
But Paula, again, throughout my career, has been a fantastic advocate and somebody I've always aspired to be like. Yeah. I think for me, we keep talking about pivotal moments, being a cover on stage. I think I was speaking with one of the other providers, and Paula, I hadn't seen her for years, came running up the middle, and she was just like, "I'm so proud of you." And to hear that from somebody who I'd fallen asleep in her meeting, that was fantastic. So no, for me, it's just head down, focus, find somebody that you aspire to be like or you really resonate with, and build a relationship with them. It doesn't need to be on a mentoring basis, but just surround yourself with the people that you want to be like.
I love that.
Brilliant.
I absolutely love that.
I've got that one thing.
I know. I was hanging on the edge of my seat to you talking about that. Yeah.
That's where I work in sales.
Yeah.
That's so brilliant. And of course, with being a lady in a senior position now and sharing that and being so candid about that is so brilliant. Thank you so much.
Especially to anybody younger than the industry now watching this. You know, you can see where you can take your career with that focus.
About, isn't it?
It's
Sharing
fantastic
that.
to see.
And I think probably just one thing to add into that, though, is it is hard work as well, though. And I'm not saying that's hard work because I'm a woman. It's hard work, full stop. If you do want to build your career, you do have to have focus. So I think if you look around the industry, men and women in our industry who have done fantastically well, names that will, you know, hang around for a long time, even though as people are getting older and retiring, we all know who they are. I think if you want to be like that, then it's just a case of, as I said, focus. But you have to be exemplary as well. You need to lead as you want to be seen. So.
Fantastic. Well, before you leave us, now you've answered that question so beautifully as well and very inspiring. What question would you leave for our next guest?
So one thing for me is I'm very process driven, but I've had to learn that because I am a winger. So to get where I have, I've had to force myself into processes, and I hate them, but it helps massively. So I guess for me, what is the one thing that helps any habit or what is the one habit that keeps you grounded and focused and on the path you need to be on?
Fantastic.
Well, That is a good question. I
Very
love
good
it.
question.
So all leaves to be said is thank you, Emma. That was an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for being so frank and candid, all that type of stuff, and personable, as always.
Thank you, and for sharing the story where you fell asleep in a meeting.
I've got so many more of those stories, but I'll stick with
We'll
that
do
one
that
for now.
part 2.
That's another day, yeah?
That can be the bloopers.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me, guys.